Well, let's get this going so we don't waste a whole lot of time.
Yeah, man, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to, I don't.
All right, yo, crew, welcome back to the Skipper Report. And I have had a hard time nailing this guest down because he's so busy growing his empire. Anyway, so I have El Jefe. And if you're not a Telemark skier, you don't know who El Jefe is. That's Josh Madsen. He is the owner of Freeheel Life Industries, Telemark Skier Magazine. What else you got going down there with the Freeheel Life world? Welcome to the show, Josh.
Yeah, good to be here. I know. Sorry, I'm hard to wrangle, man. It's good to be here finally.
Well, people think that when the ski season's over, you go play golf, right? It's like hockey, but no, you gotta get ready for next year.
Yeah, I'm the only guy that doesn't golf in out of the Freeheel Life guys. So.
Well, you know what? That's not terrible because my dad is the largest importer and distributor of golf accessories and products in Canada, and I'm the only one in the family who doesn't golf.
Yeah, it's to kind of like you said, summertime is not ever slow. The tricky part about telemark business is for sure trying to figure out how to keep the cash flow in the summer. It's the only time you have to work, so it's always like the busiest time of the year. And so it's been absolutely nuts this summer.
Right. So I want to focus this episode on kind of your life, because we hear you talk on your podcast, and I don't know, there are people out there who probably don't know a whole lot about you before Freeheel Life.
Is there a life before Freeheel Life?
Well, you know what? Not in your case, because you were on Freeheels when you were 2 years old, man. I've seen that photo out there. Those plastic like Carhu skis.
It seems like it's been so long.
Right.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys grew up skiing as family, as what I learned from your brother Lauren in his interview here on the podcast.
Yeah, trying to think. Yeah, I think I've posted a photo. I mean, I'm the only kid that was born in Utah.
Right.
And I lived in 4 states before I was 14. And really the first skis I was introduced to were cross country skis. So there's an old picture of me on this is like classic 1980s. I've got like I look like Charlie Brown basically. I've got like a brown scarf.
Right.
Like some crazy puffy coat. But they were like old, I think they were track skis if I remember. They were kind of like little fish scale, old enough that they had like a leather toe strap and
right.
I think a little cable binding. But yeah, we just like walked around the yard. That was in Missouri too.
Wow. You know what? It's incredible listening to your podcast. And I don't know how many of the young guys, maybe you can, you'd probably know of the guys on your staff, how many telemark skiers who are older started off as Nordic skiers, or like you just walking around in the grass. And, I listened to Taylor talk about how, he was going around Alta on his setup when he was a little kid. It's just how many telemark skiers come from a Nordic skiing background.
Yeah, that's funny you brought that up because I've noticed that too. I've actually been kind of surprised by that as well. I don't know what that is because it's obviously a telemark's Nordic technique, right? But it doesn't ever. Modern day cross country, I don't see I don't see as tight a correlation like like a
skate ski,
like a skate, right? Like skate and classic and just that modern race equipment. I think I never like made the connection between those two.
Right.
But yeah, people that just kind of had, I don't know, like the 80s were different too, like especially for kids on flat ground.
Right.
It seems like you're right. A lot of people I've talked to, they're like, oh yeah, I had a golf course next to my house.
Exactly.
I went walking around. I went walking on my cross country skis. I mean, that seems like a lot of us.
Yeah, yeah, and especially like in the Midwest and that sort of stuff. There's not a whole pile of places to go skiing, so you've got little bumps and hills, and you got to get back there. So you put on cross country skis, and away you go.
Yeah, I remember the first time I probably ever went downhill. We moved from St. Louis to Denver, Colorado, and it's same thing that you're explaining. We had a creek that ran below our house, and then we also had a canal that was like, I don't even know, quarter mile away,
right?
And so as a little kid, a lot of exploring in the winter was like, your mom. I mean, this is another thing that's funny talking to people on my podcast is back then, everybody, your parents literally were like, see you later.
They left you there.
Yeah. I mean, I vividly remember being like 8-10 years old, and I thought I was a mountain man back in the day.
Yeah.
I love Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh yeah.
So skiing to me at that point, I'm basically a flatland kid. The only time I remember there was a sledding hill called Carboni Park that I would walk down the canal, or I'd walk down the creek, and that was the sledding hill, and we built little jumps.
Right.
And that was the first time
How old were you then?
Oh, probably like 10,
right.
8 or 10. I don't know. I mean, but yeah, it wasn't. I did go downhill skiing one time in that era, and I think it was like a church group or something.
Right.
And it's funny thinking back to that because I'm sure we didn't have money to like rent skis or something, but my grandfather had a basement full of skis because he was the guy that taught my family how to ski. He was super old school too. Like funny side story. He would not buy lift tickets for my aunts and uncles and my mom.
Right.
He made you herringbone up.
Yep.
And ski. And then he would buy him a ticket once they could show proficiency.
Right.
So anyways, but yeah, I remember going alpine skiing, and I had to use these old skis that had the strap.
Right.
They didn't have brakes. They were like 1970s.
Yeah. I've skied on those. My dad started one of the first traveling ski schools in Quebec. And one year for Christmas, we got some ski equipment, and they'd take us out to the mall where the Greyhound bus or whatever would come and pick us up that the ski school chartered, and they'd whisk us off. So here we are, I don't know, 10 years old, going off. And like the first time, they put us on the wrong bus and they sent us to J Peak.
Oh, wow.
And then after they got that all figured out, I was like, you know what? I'm not really into traveling to go somewhere else and all by myself and this, that, and the other thing. So I just stuck around my house doing the same thing, trudging through the bush, pretending to be that outback guy, gone all day long on snowshoes or cross-country skis or something like that, cooking beans in a can on a fire.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was a Boy Scout. So
right. Same
down here in Utah, I mean, that was, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I was convinced that I was going to be a mountain man. That was like when I was a kid.
Right.
People were like, what are you going to be when you grow up? I'm like, I'm going to be a mountain man. I think everybody thinks I'm a pretty kind of punk rock looking dude now, which is kind of, it's funny to me because I didn't have tattoos. Well, I've had tattoos a long time now, but I think back to being a kid. I mean, that was more same thing. I thought survival was cool and walking around. I never had snowshoes, but yeah, same principle. I'm like, I'm just gonna go see what I can do, build a lean-to in the forest and whatever.
Yeah, I know. You listen to everybody I never had that experience like some of your guests of being dropped off at a mountain and being picked up when it's getting dark. But as a kid growing up at our cottage, I started backcountry backpacking, and then one day my buddy and we got some topo maps, and we're like at our parents' was like, we'd like you to drop us off here, and then 5 days later pick us up here. We're like 11 years old, right? No tents.
Wow.
We knew what we were doing, and they're like, yeah, sure. That wouldn't happen these days.
No, especially you think like yeah, even Matt, that's a skill I want to get better at now. I think as I'm getting older is like be a
Right.
better map reader.
Right.
I mean, because you think like now it's like, oh, cool, I got my Garmin sat phone. Let me turn this on in case I get into trouble. It's
And the
like
battery's
I think,
dead.
yeah, well, and that's what's so funny is like, yeah, a buddy of mine came back. He grew up here. He lives in New York City now, and we were just talking about this a couple days ago when he visited. He's like, I mean, the hiking trails around here now that you've got like Instagram and
Right.
people they don't prepare, man.
Oh,
They're literally just
you know what?
walking around.
I was just listening to your podcast with Tom Carter, and he was talking about being prepared.
Oh yeah, that podcast was sweet.
Yeah.
Because imagine that you're in the Yosemite Valley in the 1970s, just walking around on your skis in the winter between, summers of climbing, and nobody was there. And like you said, you got a topo map, and that's it. You're just figuring it out, So,
yeah. You know what? It's crazy. People ask, you're lost in the backcountry. What do you want, a compass or a map? And I'm like, a map, because I started paddling on Lake Superior just as GPS was starting to come out for people. And we didn't know that you had to sync the GPS with the maps using what they call the North America datum numbers. So we're out in the lake, and we're on this one island, and we're on Lake Superior. It's like 300 miles across where we are. And the guy with the GPS, we arrived somewhere. He goes, okay, we're here. And I'm like, this doesn't look like what's on the map. I think we have to go out more, and it's foggy, and we're just like two canoes, right, loaded for bear. And it's like, so the trailing canoe, he had the one map. We're in the lead canoe, and as we're going out, we can see rocks, and I'm describing what I'm seeing to Rick, and he's confirming everything, and then we like bang on. We hit where we're supposed to go. But you know what? Got to have a map. Map skills are really important.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up when you started talking about maps. I remember you telling me that story, and I can't even imagine, because yeah, people that don't know what those lakes look like.
Yeah,
I mean,
you skied up there, right? A couple of years ago.
I've been on the edge of those lakes,
yeah,
and I can tell you it looks like an ocean, not a lake, and I can't imagine being out in a small vessel,
yeah,
navigating the middle of the water out there. It's pretty brutal.
And we would file and close sail plans with the Canadian Coast Guard, because if you don't do stuff like that, you may be financially responsible for your rescue. Wow. And so I remember there were some people on the other end of the radio, and they're like, "You're out there and what? Why?" It's absolutely gorgeous. There's just you, two canoes, four people, and nature. It's awesome.
That's big water, though. I can't imagine if it gets windy.
Oh, yeah. You get stuck on the beach for a day or so, and then you learn how to spend time, baking pizzas. We had this company, we called it 33 days or free, because it'd take that long to paddle it to you.
Jeez, dude.
Yeah. So let's get back to your skiing, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So walking around, going down this creek to this little hill, building jumps, being 10 years old. And then, did you ever really alpine ski? Or you snowboarded, right?
Yes. Yep, I snowboarded. So there was, I'm trying to think. Yeah, the ski thing, it's funny thinking back to like when I was talking about going to the sledding hill. It wasn't, again, I was like a Flatland kid, My mom was a skier. We didn't really have money to go ski. I think that's what's funny when I always used to say that Salt Lake City is like what people think Denver is. Right. And so everybody moved to Denver, Colorado, because they're like, I'm moving to go to the ski town. But even back then, it's, the distance is pretty far to the ski hill. So it wasn't like you grew up in Denver. You didn't really, at least I didn't grow up thinking I'm going skiing,
right.
or whatever. When I was not long after that, I think it was the middle of 5th grade, or was it the beginning? Might have been the beginning of 5th grade. I moved up to Eagle, Colorado, which is a small town about 30 miles from Vail. My dad got a job in Vail, he worked in the hotel business. And that was really my first introduction to downhill skiing. Same thing. It's school program. Eagle back then too. If you went there now, it wouldn't make sense. Cause back when I lived there, it literally was like half the school was like cowboys,
right.
And it was like, it was a small outskirts town.
Right.
I'm pretty sure we didn't have even a grocery store.
Wow.
I mean, you pretty much had to drive we had a pharmacy. That was the big thing. You had a pharmacy that sold candy, ammo, fishing lures. What else did we get there? Like ices. That was the big thing in the summer, like Slurpees or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was it. Anyways, so
I love that. Candy and ammo.
Yeah. That's what I remember. There's a whole story why that comes to my mind. Maybe we I don't know.
We might get down there.
That road. So there was a school. I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure there was a school program that took us skiing. If not, there was a Buddy Warner program, which was kind of like a ski Saturday program. I remember getting a pair of skis at a ski swap, and that was in Vail. And I'm pretty sure I got a season pass to Vail Beaver Creek for $150.
Right.
So the parents could afford it, and they're like, yeah, you want a ski pass? And I had friends that skied. And at that point, that instead of getting dropped off at the hill, there was a bus that would go from Eagle all the way to Beaver Creek and Vail.
Right.
And I would take that as a kid, and that was pretty much how I got into alpine skiing. So the funny thing is I only lived there like 2 seasons. I skied the first year, learned to ski. I had this cool little crew of kids that we just skied every weekend together. Like we'd do our Buddy Warner program, and then we'd free ski together. And I think that's where the cultural side of it was fun. Like I was like a little kid, and I had this little posse of friends that I could just ski with. But the next season one season of alpine, then I hopped into snowboarding and bought a snowboard at Gart Brothers Snea Grab. I remember that was like the well-known sporting goods store back then.
Did you call did you say Snea Grab?
Snea Grab is what it was called.
Really? Wow. German for snow.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I went to a workshop. It might be Austrian, but yeah, they were asking this wax tech. There were all these alpine racer kids there, and they're talking about wax. And the dude was like, "Schnee is Schnee. Do you know what Schnee is?"
Yeah, Schnee. Yeah. Yep. So that was like the big. Yeah, it's funny to think back about retail back then, just kind of like the different sales, and it just, I don't know. It seemed different back then. But I snowboarded for a season. That was it. So like I basically only alpined 1 season, and then I snowboarded a season, and then we moved again.
Right.
And moved to Pennsylvania. And for people that know the states well, I mean, you go from like Flatland, Denver, mountains of Colorado, and then I moved to basically like cornfields of Pennsylvania, like Western PA.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Eastern is like rolling hills.
Yeah. It's probably, I think Eastern PA is a little more like Ontario.
Yeah, it is.
Look, there's hills in Western PA too, but where we literally lived with a corn, like we were some subdivision with cornfields around it.
Right.
Super isolated kind of.
That's where I learned to ski, was in a cornfield. My uncle's farm. He had a pair of boots. They were too big, and he had a snow machine, and we skijored behind the snow machine out in the fields in the wintertime. That's how we figured out how to ski.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Yeah. So that was, and I was too young to drive.
Right.
So I basically, I think I've mentioned that on the podcast before too, but it's like we I remember taking the snowboard to the local mountain, and then they turned me away because it was
Right.
it was probably 19, it had to be like 1989 or something, somewhere in there. So
Yeah.
they didn't even allow snowboards. And then basically it was like, all right, we can't afford this. We don't have it's like I always talk about the access, right? Like
Exactly.
the only reason I got into snow sports was because there was like the ability to like go do it, for a fairly low price,
Right.
as a kid. So yeah, that's my, I alpine skied, snowboarded, was there 2 years, moved to Utah, went back to tried snowboarding still, realized I sucked at it because all the kids here were good at it, went back to alpine skiing for a year, and then I started telemark skiing.
Wow.
So it's kind of a weird start.
Okay, so how'd you get into telemark?
So I had seen telemark skiing. I remember distinctly, probably in that Pennsylvania area, I remember seeing a guy telemark ski from the lift. Classic. I saw the guy from the lift.
Right.
But then when I came to Salt Lake, I'm trying to even remember how I heard about it. Might have just been seeing somebody. I had a uncle who was kind of like a rock climber, survival, same thing, kind of just like an outdoorsman, like that kind of guy. And I'm pretty sure he had done it a little bit, but I had it in my mind that it was something to do. And I went to the library across the street from my junior high school when I was 14, got a book called Cross Country Downhill. And it was kind of just connecting these pieces. Like I found a book at the library. I had these old skis my dad had from back in the Missouri days that I was talking about. And that was pretty much it. I read Cross Country Downhill. I went and taught myself how to ski telemark on a resort with a book.
Right.
That was it. And I'd go up the lift, read the book, put the book in the backpack, try to ski,
It's amazing how many of the OG telemarkers have done that.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. The book thing is funny because people are still reading books that, like, no one's put out a legitimate telemark book in a long time.
Right.
I mean, Paul Parker probably was the last. Well, probably the Mike. What's that one? Mike and.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Telemark tips, whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the classic one. Everybody says, throw that in your backpack, pull it out every once in a while. Yep. Yeah,
I was looking at that the other day. I did not. I don't remember having a copy of that. I remember seeing that one. Honestly, the gear I learned on probably made more sense learning from a book that matched the gear.
Right.
Even though it was, this is like 93, but the book was from like 1978.
Right.
But the gear I was on was probably 1985.
Yeah.
So just the technique of it was probably a lot easier to learn from that particular book.
Right.
But yeah, I skied on that first setup I split one season on Alpine and Tele, but I remember distinctly thinking that if I didn't totally dedicate to it, I was never going to figure it out. Because that older gear, man, it took a lot longer to figure out how to do it. And I mean, I was trying to ski bumps at first. I remember that was the big test, was I have to ski bumps, but leathers, pins, and 210s was like not bump worthy skis, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, that's how I learned how to telemark, was from that book.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, I remember once I got my gear and I taught myself, the internet was pretty new, and I'd be on telemark tips, and there'd be Uma Franosh or something like that.
Yeah, from Mammoth.
Yeah, so I would take a look at. You had little snippets of lessons. It's like, okay, I'll go work on that today. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I forgot about that guy.
Yeah.
Some of those guys that had like early tutorials. I
Yeah.
think the internet's totally changed. Like
Oh yeah.
there's so much ability to look at video, um, anything you want to do, right? Like fix your house,
Yep.
telemark ski.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why I call
probably,
it YouTube Academy.
yeah. I mean, you don't really need to go to college,
No.
honestly. If you
Yeah.
just sit and watch videos, you
Yeah.
probably could figure out most things.
Yeah. Yeah. So your telemark skiing, I really got to know you through movies and that sort of stuff. So how did you progress from your leather boots and 210 skis and being studious on the chair to slaying it in parks and big mountains and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I tellied through high school. I was pretty diehard telemark. It's funny. I think there's kind of like multiple pieces to this, story, but
this is around the time when you're thinking about the Freeheel Life, just before you get your Volkswagen Westphalia or something like that.
Well,
right?
what's funny, that's what I was gonna say is one thing. I don't know if I've even talked about this that much, but in high school, so I learned when I'm 14. So I'm in like 8th, 9th grade, which is junior high school here.
Yeah.
That's when I learned how to telly. So I don't even have a car yet. I can't drive. I'm like 2 years from being able to drive. And by the time I get to high school, I get my driver's license like sophomore year. I was pretty old for my grades. So the minute I got to high school, I pretty much could drive a car. And I mean, it's funny because sometimes I always say like I wasn't as big a telemark skier as I was into like rock climbing back then. But the funny thing is like by high school, I basically commandeered my parents' minivan.
Right.
And this obviously the van thing becomes like this common.
I was just gonna say that.
Well, what's funny? So the neighborhood we moved to in Salt Lake was less than 10-minute walk to Black Diamond.
Okay.
So I just happened to live in this neighborhood right below. In Salt Lake, there was this. It's funny thinking back to that era. Because this little complex had been built. I can't remember what it was, but it basically looks like a little Swiss village.
Right.
People would probably think Black Diamond built this thing, but if I remember right, it was like an abandoned Swiss village somebody tried to build in the middle of this neighborhood by us as kind of like a corner market or whatever. And then Black Diamond had moved in there. So you've got the Black Diamond retail store. You've got Black Diamond manufacturing warehouse. And then you had a rock climbing gym. And the first time I ever saw a guy living in his van that I remember was at outside the rock gym and the warehouse were like right next to each other. And so these guys had started moving, these climbers and skiers had started moving. Black Diamond was really a climbing company back then. They hadn't really got into ski stuff, but they were distributing the Scarpa stuff back then.
Okay.
So the North American distributor for Scarpa was Black Diamond in the early days. So if you wanted telemark boots, that was the retail shop you'd go to, or one of them. There's a couple here. And then the rock climbing gym. And anyways, these guys were living in their vans in the parking lot of Black Diamond. And I remember one of the guys, I think still, they called him B-Rad, Brad, I think Bartlage, something like that. He had a little Toyota van that he lived in outside of the warehouse. And these guys were just climbing, living in their van and working at Black Diamond.
Right.
And so anyways, how that plays in is I get this idea when I'm like 16. I'm like, well, we've got a minivan at home, which is like our family minivan. And like I said, I mean, commandeered is probably the best way I can describe it, because I basically start driving that to school, and that becomes the telly cave. I am convinced at that point that I'm the telly man, and Batman had a cave, and telly man also needs a cave.
Right.
So I ripped the seats out of the back because they had the detachable seats. You know, it's a 90 grand Caravan. I'm pulling the seats out. I literally went to the hardware store and bought stickers that like the lettering stickers and put Telly Cave on the side. And I don't know why my parents put up with any of this, but yeah, so that was it. So I was just like, in the wintertime, I just started like I put a cot in the back of the van,
right,
which my parents were not thrilled about. And yeah, I would like go climbing and skiing. So anyways, so I was pretty diehard
right,
telly in high school, but I didn't really, I mean, this is like the mid 90s. Like I don't know. I don't know if I'm really answering your question. I went further back than your question.
No. This is cool because you know what? Most people can get information out of your podcast. You and I have been friends for quite some time, but I was wanting to get information that is stored back there that, you know, you just got to take some massaging to get out. These are all awesome stories because this is like the beginning of Freeheel Life.
Yeah, and it's funny.
Or the Freeheel Life.
When I go back to high school, I mean, I was diehard. I mean, I'm a pretty intense person, I would say. But like, imagine like 16, 17-year-old brain where you're like, this is the only way, you know? So that's totally how I was. I was like, I tried to get everybody to telemark that I could.
Yeah.
And then, so that was the first time I did a ski trip was in high school. I'd say that was pretty influential because I read about all these resorts in probably Powder Magazine or something like that. And that was the first big ski trip we did. I planned this ski trip. It's funny. This is how funny I was. I planned the ski trip. I took pictures out of all the magazines and clipped them.
Right.
And I would like glue them on to pieces of blank paper. And I created this whole trip. And I think I called it like
your storyboard, man.
Exactly. I storyboarded. I had this idea that I was going to live in the van and I was going to drive to 9 resorts in 11 days. And I storyboarded it out. I called it El Gnarly Ski Trip of like 1998 or no, it wouldn't have been 98. Probably 97. I think I did it my senior year of high school. And we just boogied, man. That was the first time. And that was so pre-internet.
Like, I was going to say, where the hell was YouTube, man? You imagine that?
Here's what's funny about that. I actually found the resort emails. I don't even know. I must have had to like call the operator. I don't even know. How did you find numbers back in it was
phone books, man.
Yeah, but it was like pre-phone books. I mean, like, because it wasn't local resorts, right? So it was like another state because this was all going to be in Colorado.
Right.
And so 9 resorts in 11 days was the goal. And however I got the info, I sent away for pamphlets from the resorts. And so I had like trail maps ahead of time and I knew how much the ticket prices were. And then a lot of that gas money, I'm pretty sure I collected at the vending machines at school. And I took a 2-liter bottle. I probably had some money from mowing lawns or something too, but I had like a 2-liter bottle. I remember I duct taped it and I would stand by the vending machines and all, you know, I went to I was not an affluent kid, but I went to a fairly rich school.
Right.
So you stand by the vending machine, man, and ask for 50 cents.
Yeah.
Kids were like, oh yeah, dude, here. I'm like, I'm going on a ski trip. You know, you want to pitch in for the gas?
Yeah.
And people would just give me quarters.
Yeah.
And gas was 95 cents back then. So, you know, you make $1 at lunch, you got a gallon of gas.
Yeah. You got like 15 miles closer to your destination.
Yeah. So that was the big thing from that. I was just diehard, worked at a resort, taught skiing. So I had a pass. I was always trying to find a way to get a pass because that made sense. But I still was like much more of a climber than I was a skier at that point. So it wasn't really, honestly, what's funny when I think about like some pre-story to this whole thing, there wasn't some plan. I think a lot of it kind of was happen chance. Like it just sort of materialized that way because
all the stars aligned.
yeah, because it's like, I mean, in one way I've totally been able to kind of fulfill my dreams of building a business in telemark and doing some cool stuff and being able to travel.
Yeah.
But you know, like by the early 2000s, I thought I was gonna, again, I was working at climbing shops, not ski shops.
Right.
And I was skiing in the winter. It just was kind of like that. Like I did something in the summer and I did something in the winter.
Right.
Like most people. And I think really the turning point was I tried to I had another van, the 69 VW bus you were talking about.
Yep.
And
wonder if it's still living. Because I know the story who you sold it to, kids, and you came across it again, and yeah.
Yeah, that was a funny ending to that one for sure. But yeah, so yeah, I guess like the beginning of it, the early 2000s was kind of where it switched on, where I was like, oh, I could use this as a vehicle to travel. Because I had some opportunities pop up. Again, that's what I'm saying. Like I didn't ever start the whole thing to get where I am now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It just was like one thing happened and then I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. And I don't know, man. I didn't go to college. I went to college I tried to go to college a couple times, but I don't know. I think a lot of this all just came about because I think when you're somebody who doesn't, like, especially 20 years ago, I didn't have a traditional education to say I'm going this pathway. Like I have this degree, I'm going to get this job. I think I've always tried to be someone like when a job popped up, I'm like, hey, do you want this work?
Yeah.
It's like, yes.
Yeah.
And so I just learned to say yes.
Yep.
It just kept going. So
right. So from that, you're a ski athlete, right?
Yeah. So that was the big thing. Was I tried to move to the beach.
Right.
In that van, in that 69 bus, the bus breaks. Like I break up with this girl. I'm living in northern Utah. I break up with this girl. Actually bought that bus from her brother. And maybe he sabotaged it. I don't know. So I drive to Salt Lake and I'm convinced that I'm going to move to the beach and become a surf bum. And I get to Salt Lake and the bus breaks, the engine blows up. And I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? I got no money to fix the van. And so I hitchhike up to Alta, get a job up there as a dishwasher. And during that season, I reconnect with a friend of mine I met teaching telemark skiing in northern Utah at the ski school there. She's like, do you want to go shoot photos? And this is like 2002. We had been telemark racing a little bit together. Right. So that, I guess during that time, that's the one little transition thing too, is I thought, oh, I'm going to be a tele racer and I'm going to make the US team. That was my initial thought process.
Right.
Again, there's no plan to it other than it's sort of a way to get somewhere. Yeah. And I go shoot photos with this photographer and she's the girl that's shooting photos with the Unparalleled movies. Her name was Beth Lockhart. And basically I shoot some photos. She's like, yeah, you're pretty good at this. I was a good telemark skier, but I never thought I was like any phenomenal, like blowing you out of the water guy or I wasn't like doing some crazy tricks, but she's like, I bet I could get you some skis from Karhu as like a sponsorship. And I had kind of dabbled in that with the race thing, trying to get pro deals. It's funny thinking back to that because it's like any deal you could get, you were like, yeah, I'm getting hooked up, you know, you
Right.
feel pretty spicy about it. She got me a free pair of skis and then got me hooked up with some boots. And I don't know, I think that was the light bulb. That's really where things kind of veered off to the telemark stuff,
Right.
because then I realized this was my ticket to travel, or an excuse to travel, because I connect with her. She's making telemark movies. Unparalleled 2 just came out. And I'm like, this is crazy. I didn't even know this stuff existed. Like,
Right.
there's like ski movies, and you can shoot photos and be in a magazine. And so, you know, I'm 21 years old. I'm 22 years old. And I'm
Right.
like, this seems cool. Like, and I just got a free pair of skis from it. So that's when the light bulb went on with that. And long story short, I basically spent 7 years accumulating sponsorships, being in movies, being in magazines, and just kind of learning the ropes of, you know, I think more what I thought about it. I never liked to call myself a professional athlete. I never liked that term, because I always had a job, right? Like,
Yeah.
I always had that wasn't my income.
Yeah.
Although I did make some money at it later down the road, you know, it was minimal in comparison to like a full-time salary or something like that. But yeah, that's kind of when the light bulb switched on from the business side, as I was like, man, it was my ticket to travel, you
Right.
know. And early on in the athlete thing, someone called me Richard Scherf, who
Yeah.
you probably know from Freeheeler over in Europe. He calls Carhu. I think he was distributing Carhu at the time, and says, hey, I want to fly a couple guys over to my festival at Stubai
Mm-hmm.
in Austria. Yeah, and it was things like that, man. I get to go to Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like a kid. I got no money, and I'm in my early 20s. I got no legit job, and someone just flew me to Europe.
Right.
So saying yes to these little things before that, all of a sudden are paying my trip to Europe. And I'm just like,
Blown away.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You know, and so that's what really got me. Yeah, that's what got the taste going for, how do I make this keep doing stuff like that? You know, how do I create, I don't think we call it content back then, but how do I get in front of enough people so that they want to fly me
Right.
to a festival or something? I mean, that's kind of what it was. Like,
Yeah.
how can I be of value? How can I be of service to people so
Right.
they want to take me to far off places and adventures, you know?
So is that, so we've gone through that, and then there'll be a whole pile of stuff in between what I know you as, I think it was the editor of Telemark Skier magazine. So you went to what the hell's it called? It's just outside Johnson, Vermont, on Jeffersonville. Yeah, to Height of Land Publications, I think, because they bought Telemark Skier magazine from Dosty, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so you went and interned there, right?
No, that's a funny story too, dude. These are all funny stories, because it's funny that you're asking about it, because one of the things that's funny about that transition from that 7 years of being an athlete, I'd say that was kind of the first phase of stuff. But like I said, it was never a full-time job. I mean, It was so hard. If people go listen to my podcast with Ben Dolans that I did a couple weeks ago, I mean, he's one of the only guys. That was actually really enlightening to me, because he was the only guy that I knew. He and my friend Sarah Clemenson, who actually was the one I taught skiing with in northern Utah. She's the one who got me hooked up with the athlete thing.
Right.
She was also a Nike athlete. But outside of those guys, I didn't know anybody that made a living.
Right.
And so I did 7 years. I was in the Warren Miller film one year.
I know that's how I think I first became aware of you.
Well, and that's what's so crazy is like that whole, I think back to that era, like, I mean, to put that in perspective before I kind of lead you into the tele skier stuff. the Warren Miller thing, to put it in perspective, like people are like, oh, you were in Warren Miller. Like, wow, that's amazing. So you're thinking like, man, this guy's got this like telemark career going on, right? Well, here's the funniest part about that. I lucked out. Again, total aligning of the stars. I was a Canyons athlete, which is now owned by, it's part of Park City now, but it was its own resort.
Right.
They call me and they're like, do you want to be in the Warren Miller film? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And to even get in that, the only reason is they were paying for the segment. But people don't realize those movies, it's all who's sponsoring that year's movie. It's their athletes, right? So to be a telemark skier and get in there, I'm skiing for Karhu, which is like this weird little independent brand.
Yep.
But to put it in perspective, I didn't have even, someone was giving me, Nike actually through my friends was giving me some clothing, but I didn't make any money. I didn't have a contract, anything. So when I got that call for Warren Miller, they were sponsored by Obermeyer.
Right.
They're like, you can be in the movie, but you have to wear Obermeyer. And I'm like, okay. I sent my sizes to them and they shipped me the stuff to wear in the movie.
Right.
And when it got to the tour, that, you know, I was thinking exactly like, this is my opportunity to get in front of people.
Yeah.
During the movie tour. So I call Warren Miller. I'm like, man, I know I'm not in this crazy helicopter segment, whatever, but I'd love to come to some of the tour dates. Cause that's really what I wanted to be, in a band and tour. That's where this all started. Right. I want someone to help. I want to be a traveling man. So I basically I asked these guys, I'm like, hey, can I come to these tour dates? And I mapped out all the tour dates and I said, can I come? They're like, we cannot pay you to come to the tour dates. We cannot give you lodging, but what we can promise you is if you get to a tour date, we'll introduce you at the front of the show as an athlete at the show. We'll let you throw swag out. Those movies were like the 2 hour long movies.
Yes.
So
they have the intermission.
The intermission.
Yeah.
So you can throw swag at the intermission. And if you bring your own poster, which they're not going to pay for, we'll give you a table and you can sign whatever poster thing you bring.
Yeah.
And I talked Karhu into making this like little, it wasn't even like a full poster. It was kind of like almost like a card stock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like large card stock thing. And it had like 2 sides and it was promoting the 05-06 Team 100 ski that just came out.
Right.
The fun part about that tour is I didn't have a car. And so I didn't have a way to get to places. So I said, okay, I can do the Utah shows. Those are easy. But I would hitch rides, literally thumb rides, to get to the show with my posters.
Right.
And a Sharpie. And I remember a couple of fun ones. Ogden, Utah, north of here, about 45 minutes. I actually left the show. I walked like 5 miles to the freeway or something, thumbed a ride, and got picked up by people that I signed posters for. And they were literally like, dude, aren't you the guy that just was at the Warren Miller film? I'm like, I don't have a car.
Right.
And they drove me back to Salt Lake. I took Greyhound buses to the Colorado shows.
Right.
And dude, I thumbed it. I literally hitchhiked to those shows, and it's super crazy.
That's rad. Because remember how I told you we didn't have a car when I was a kid, and we were the Greyhound camping people?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Oh yeah.
So I took. Oh man, I could go.
Those are the awesome stories that I like to hear, and hopefully listeners and your listeners on your podcast will get some of that stuff that they don't know about, right?
Yeah, and I think so. Anyways, the point of that being just to kind of shed light on, I mean, when you say you're a sponsored athlete, and that's in the heyday, right? Like This is like Telemark's going pretty good at that point. We were all broke, and so anyways, I got to the end of doing 7 years of that, and I was I basically just came to a dead end. I was like, dude, I'm almost 30 years old. I think I was 30. I think that was kind of around that time. And I was like, I was like, I don't know what to do. I mean, there was no, like I always say, I think this is kind of when I maybe started feeding into that whole idea of building a telemark industry, because I saw all these amazing people that were even much better skiers than I was, sponsored skiers, whatever. But you kind of think that the people that are influencing the media, like that are in the movies and stuff, maybe there would be an outlet for some of them to have a job afterwards,
Right.
like
Yeah.
a marketing guy, or dude, dead end, boom. I mean, I was like, yeah, I could ski bum the rest of my life like this, but there was no opportunity left. And so
Right.
I actually quit.
Right.
I
No
literally
way.
quit doing telly stuff for about 6 or 8 months, maybe. And I thought we'd made the one Lipstick Films movie, and I thought, well, maybe I can go to film school. So I enrolled in the Art Institute and started pounding nails with my friend, building log cabins in the mountains in the summer. And I was like, well, I guess that's it. I mean, I thought maybe I could get into video production, or I was kind of grasping it. Like, I was like, well, I don't really, what's my skill set now? Like
Yeah.
7 years of being a telemarketer, like, hey dude, you're really good at traveling and dropping knees,
Right.
like
Right.
I didn't really have a resume outside of that. So I basically quit. I remember I told my mom, I was like, I guess I'm going to pound nails and go to school, because I don't know what to do. And that, I got enrolled in school, and I started that semester. And then I randomly got a phone call from Adam Howard,
Right.
who's one of the owners of Heideland Publications. He's like, hey, we bought Telemark Skier magazine. And I was like, cool. What does that have to do with me?
Exactly. Yep.
He's like, I want you to be the editor. And I'm like, I don't know how to edit anything. And he's like, yeah, but you got, we've seen you in some of these Telemark movies. You got, we can help you be the editor. We know you've written I think I'd written like one article or something for Skiing magazine or something. Maybe even Telemark Skier. I can't remember. I mean, so I've got like zero experience, right? Like I don't know how to edit a magazine. I don't even know how to put a print magazine together. And Howie's like, no, we'll pay you. I mean, it was minuscule, dude. The offer was like a couple $1,000 per issue, and there was 2 issues.
Right.
So again, here I am getting an offer to like hop back into this, and I got not really a way to make an income. It didn't really solve the problem, but I was passionate, and I was like, at that point, I'm like,
you were able to live. You were able to live.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, he's like, you can work remote. You don't need to move to Vermont. You can work in Salt Lake, and I'll help you build the magazine. And I was like, cool, I can use my contacts to write the articles. And anyway, so that's how I got the job.
Right.
So I drop out of school again. And that was it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I basically was like, I kept trying to start school, and then it just wasn't happening. I was like, well, this is the omen from the telemark gods, that I guess I'm supposed to like give this a shot now. And but the funny thing was about that, so to go back to the travel thing, he offers me a couple $1,000 an issue, and I'm thinking I can't survive on that. And I'm like, I convinced him to throw an extra $1,500 in the mix on top of that. And I said, if you give me $1,500, I can buy a projector, and I can buy a mini PA system, like a sound system.
Yep.
And I pitched the idea. I said, hey, I've got a bunch of footage from a second Lipstick movie that we never put out. We were supposed to make a second movie in 2008, and it never happened. And this is like 2009 2009-ish. And And I knew I had JT Robinson, my other friend. He had provided a ton of footage for other film companies. He had a bunch of footage. And so I said, you pitch in an extra $1,500. I said, I'll book a 50 city US tour and I'll make a movie. And the funny part about it is I didn't even make the first lipstick movie. I was like the guy that got the sponsorships. So I went and bought a projector at a local university, a used one from a classroom, and I bought a PA system. And I clipped all that old footage together from what would have been the second lipstick movie and then whatever JT could give me. And I basically called that the Freeheel Life.
Right.
And I booked a 50 city tour, and that is how I made the remainder of my money and got on the road. So
wow,
kind of the common theme. Like I kind of kept seeing these opportunities to travel.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. So I put fall 2009, I put out the Freeheel Life, which was kind of a mixtape of all this random footage. And I put it together with a bunch of music. I edited it that summer and made the 2 magazines. And then I used that tour to go promote the print magazine in front of people through the movies.
Right.
So that's the long answer backstory to the Telemark Skier thing. Is basically I quit because I was like, and I'm not a quitter, but I didn't know where to go. Right. Like there was nothing.
You know what? You didn't quit. You just needed some time off to think about it, man.
Well, and funny enough, that's really when the Telemark's Dead thing started.
Right.
Back in that era. And so all the companies had already kind of jumped ship,
right.
You know, like
yeah.
there's just nothing going on. So that was basically, you can thank Adam Howard for
right on
roping me back in. And that's kind of how that all started. So
I know those guys are pretty cool. I, on my way to my cottage, I went down to Height of Land Productions, and I was like, I was buying some of their stuff, you know, some of the swag that Telemark or Backcountry Skier and that sort of stuff. But it's like freaking expensive to get it up into Canada. So on the way to the cottage, I kind of make a little detour. I roll up in my Chrysler 300, and they're all out having a mid-afternoon break, and I jump out and I go, I'm here. And they're like, who the hell's this guy, right? And so I told them, and they're like, oh, come on in here. So I go in to buy some stuff, and they're like, well, here, take this and have that, and, you know, so, good
that
crew.
Was cool. That office was cool because it was like that old house. And if people haven't been to Jeffersonville, it's like
nothing.
I mean, it's like 500 people.
Yeah, if that. Yeah, they've got it. They've got a distillery there now, a vodka distillery.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Right on. Was it Route 5? I think that goes across the state there. Yeah, no. or it might be Route 100. Might be Route 100.
Yeah, I think Route 100 comes down into there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but I didn't really live. I didn't really live in. I'm trying to even think. I don't even know if
I think I heard the story that you lived in their van in the back of the old house.
I bought the what's now the creepy black van that everybody always comments on. was I bought that in 2010. I bought that in 2010 because while I was on tour, so I didn't work out of the office the first two years, first two cycles of the magazine. I worked from Salt Lake, and then I'd make these movies in the summer. So basically that kind of led into, you know, then Howie and those guys over there, there was John Howard, Adam Howard, Justin Ryer. Those guys are basically like, they realize like, I just want to road dog it.
Right.
And so they're like, well, why don't we make that part of Telemark Skier is you can make these movies, put a movie out every fall, do the tour.
Right.
You can do two print magazines. And then we added the second year, we added the NTN demo tour.
Right.
And so I did that. And so, I just lived on the road. And then I got in a head-on car collision in outside of Jeffersonville and Smuggler's Notch.
Right.
On tour. And I had to drive a rental car back from Vermont to Utah. And then I bought that other van.
Right.
And then I moved into that van And that's when that's last summer of it would have been 2011, spring 2011. I lived in that van in Jeffersonville over the summer outside the office.
Wow.
Which was super funny because there's a bank next door, and
yes,
I'd try to park the doors so that I would get out between the building and the van.
Right.
Because the old ladies at the bank would always be looking at me like, where did that guy come from? 7 a.m. in the morning. They had a shower at it was an old house, right?
Yes.
So they had a shower at the office.
Yeah.
That was it, man. I just wandered around this old building in my van for a whole summer in Jeffersonville.
Hey, I'm going to ask you something because we're like just over an hour now. Do you want to do a part 2 sometime in the future? Because I don't want to hold you up from your day.
That's fine. I mean, we can keep talking for a minute, but yeah. If you want to do a part 2, we can do part 2.
Yeah.
I know you get me talking. You knew this was going to happen.
I know. Well, I know. That's why that was like with Adam Sourwin when I did his. I met him through social media, and we meet up at the City Garage in Ellicottville, and we start talking. I want to get into all this sort of stuff because he builds vans. Hey, there's the van life again. He converts, those sketchy white transit vans and that into really nice camper vans, and then he lives in it, and then he'll sell it, and then he'll build another one. But in the meantime, his sort of Freeheel Life, as I say in quotations, is he calls it the pursuit, and it's the pursuit.
Is this the mad
Mr. Adam X.
Adam X, I've seen his stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, so okay. I didn't get to talk about the van conversion stuff, so it's like, dude, can I hit you up for a second episode? And he's like, oh, hell yeah, anytime, man. So
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's fun talking about it, man. Sometimes I forget. I think, there's a lot of twists and turns, and there's a lot of random.
Oh, it's amazing where you end up, eh?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I look at where we're at now, and I'm like, it really is like one foot in front of the other, man. And I think at some point, I guess kind of a way to wrap up that whole section. It's like, at some point I kind of just had to say, oh, this is the path I'm currently on.
Yeah.
And you just like hunker down and say, hey, I'm going to see how many opportunities I can build out of this vein of things.
Well, at least you've got a plan that way. Like in my life, I'm really lucky I'm married to Sean, because I think she's the only woman who would put up with my shit.
I think most of our women are like that. Like that's the criteria. Like, here's my list of bullshit. Like, are you cool with it or what?
I don't have a list. It just kind of it appears. It's like, you're announcing, oh yeah, we're making the Protector skis. And I was like, okay, I bought his first pair of switchblades that he ever made. It's like, it makes sense that hopefully I get the first pair of Protector 95s that you got. And Sean goes, yeah, but you might have to get rid of a pair of skis or not. So I already got rid of them. So I got a little bit of cash in there. Yep, a buddy of mine bought my Ski Logics.
I like it, man.
Yeah,
I know you've been a great supporter over that. I mean, honestly, that's the whole. I mean, I guess the underlying flow to the whole story that I've been talking about is, if there wasn't people along the way that had supported the ideas that I was coming up with, like, I totally wouldn't be here. I mean, even today, right. I mean, it's like, it's still sort of a living experiment, and I don't know, man. I've met so many cool people like you over the years, and whether it's people picking me up hitchhiking to Warren Miller shows, or people that came to tours that I did, like, I mean, for the most part, this has been until up to the last 6 years, it was pretty much a one-man show, you know? So
could you imagine, I watch a news segment on CBS, and it's like a note to self, younger self. So what do you got, about 9 or 10 employees in your shop this year? Like, you imagine doing what you're doing.
There's 9.
Yeah. And doing what you're doing now, what your 14-year-old or 13-year-old self would say or think, eh?
Yeah, it's funny. If I had to go back, it wasn't until this evolution of what Freeheel Life is now, like a retail shop. Now we're getting into some manufacturing. I mean, if I went back in time, that's the one thing I wish I would have figured out earlier was is making products, like even t-shirts, man. Yeah. I look back to when we did like lipstick films, or I was making DVDs at the time, and I remember that was the first time I was like, wow, I can make this thing and sell it and make money. That was pretty cool.
Right.
But it never connected with me to make more stuff. I don't know why.
Yeah, people want to buy stuff that says I was there.
Right. Well, and that's what's so funny is like, I think at that point, I think that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned over the years is I was doing stuff at a time where we had the ability to get the cameras to make media. And I took the job at Telemark Skiing, because I was really convinced. I was like, oh, media is what's going to inspire people to get into this thing. And to a point, I still agree with that, but it was almost impossible to make money from it because I just happened to, at the same time, it became accessible to buy commercial grade film equipment, for instance. Right. Like you could kind of get that. I mean, now my iPhone shoots better than the stuff I was making movies with.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about now. But it was like, it didn't quite add up how I would have hoped. It's like we were able to get the camera gear and the editing equipment because everything was digitized. But at the same time, I was making movies at a time when people didn't want to pay to go see a movie or buy a DVD because things were going to digital.
Right.
So yeah, that's the only part I wish I would have figured out more is when I turned the Freeheel Life into the retail shop, that started making a lot more sense because I was like, oh, there's a need for this. And I guess on the flip side, I never would have come up with that idea if I hadn't have driven around the country and gone to festivals in Europe and done all this other stuff, because those opportunities opened my mind to the idea that people needed that stuff. So, right. I mean, it's coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? Like I could go back in time, but I wouldn't have pieced it together the same way, you know, because I didn't have the experiences to build it off of.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you know what? Let's end this episode here. And I'll tell the listeners to stay tuned in the future for part 2 of our interview with El Jefe down in Salt Lake City.
I love it, man. Thanks for letting me tell some stories.
Oh, I love stories. You know what? As a teacher, everybody knew, you know, oh, yeah, we get Woodsy off track. He'll tell stories, and we don't have to learn anything. But little did they know, I knew what they were doing, and I would throw the lessons in there.
Yeah, that's smart.
All right. Thanks a lot, Josh. And we'll catch you on the next episode.
Sounds good, man. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Skipper Report. And a huge thank you to Josh Madsen, owner of the Freeheel Life Industries and everything that goes along with it on Instagram. You can find him at Josh No Madsen, at Freeheel Life, at Teleskier Mag, on the Freeheel Life Facebook group. And finally at telemarkskier.com, relaunch of the former print version of Telemark Skier magazine. Thanks again. Check back in a little while for a new episode with a new guest, and then keep an eye out for part 2 of the interview with El Jefe. Thanks again.